Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The kid had both hands on my gate again. I am Alex and I was 29 that afternoon, old enough to know better. He twisted the latch up hard and the whole thing jumped open. My stomach dropped and I stepped forward fast, already bracing for impact. "Stop right there," I snapped as the gate swung wide. He laughed and bolted straight for my porch like it was a game. His sandals smacked the steps and he grabbed for my doorknob. My only rule lived right there: no kid near that door. "Back in your yard now," I shouted from the bottom step. He glanced over his shoulder and kept moving like I was background noise. Heat rushed up my chest and filled my mouth with static. If he reached that door again, I knew something ugly would come out. "Get away from my door, you little shit." That sentence ripped out of me before I even heard it. It cracked through the air and snapped everything else silent. He froze mid-step and the whole yard seemed to hold breath. His mother spun around so fast she nearly lost her coffee. She caught the cup against her chest and just glared at me. "What did you just call my son?" Her voice came out thin and sharp and it cut right through me. The kid shuffled back toward her and grabbed a fistful of her shirt. "He keeps running through my door," I said with my jaw locked. "He does not know better yet," she snapped with her eyes wide. We stood there packed into that little strip of concrete and pure frustration. Her son shifted behind her leg and squeezed it like a shield. "You do not ever call my baby that word," she warned through her teeth. She slammed that word down like it was heavier than the rest. Across the way, a set of blinds twitched and someone started paying attention. "You keep letting him run straight into my place," I shot back. I heard how hard I leaned on that word "my," and I hated it. It sounded small and selfish, and still I would not let it go. Every sentence felt like it was writing a complaint on the air. Then the worst part hit in the middle of that standoff. Her kid looked straight at me and tried the word on himself. "Shit," he said and grinned like he had unlocked a secret door. His mother flinched away from him and then whipped her head back toward me. "See what you did?" She threw her arm toward him like a slap. "He picked that up from you in 1 second," she said with her face flushed. She took one step closer to the fence like she might climb over. I stepped back and my heel hit the top stair behind me hard. "You scare him and you swear at him and you still think you are right." Her voice cracked on that last word and it rattled straight through me. This was not just a quick explosion anymore, it was starting to stretch wider. I could feel the argument already leaking past the sidewalk and into the rest of my week. I opened my mouth and every thought inside my head crashed together. An apology sat next to raw irritation, and neither one wanted to move. "Keep him out of my yard," was all I finally got out. Her answer came out low and tight, and it felt a lot more serious. "We will talk about this again," she said and tugged him away. She turned without another glance and marched toward their place like a verdict. He kept staring back at me over her shoulder like the scene was still rolling. I stayed on my steps and realized this mess was only getting started. The pounding started hard enough to rattle the frame. The whole thing thumped again before I even reached the handle. For a second I honestly hoped it was a delivery mix-up. Then I heard her voice through the wood and my stomach went tight. I cracked the door just enough to look out. She shoved it wider with her shoulder and stepped right into the entry. Behind her stood a guy with folded arms and a clenched jaw. The boy was tucked halfway behind his leg like a shield with ears. "You really thought that was okay?" She planted herself in the middle of the hallway and stared me down. Her hands were shaking and coffee dripped off her fingers onto the floor. I knew exactly what she meant and still stalled like an idiot. "You cannot speak to a child like that ever again." She pushed each word out slow and wired with anger. "He is 3 and you curse it at him to his face." The kid watched my mouth like he expected another forbidden phrase. "I need him away from my door," I answered too fast. My voice came out thin and higher than I wanted. It sounded more scared than firm, and that annoyed me immediately. I heard the guy snort and that stung more than it should. "We have normal neighbors and then we have you." He shifted his weight closer and looked me up and down once. "Always yelling about something through the walls and now this." That line hit harder because I knew there was some truth buried there. You are missing the point, I tried again and gripped the edge. I have told you before he cannot come into my place. I felt my fingers digging into th. You would like that would prove anything. They stared at my hand like I was the one losing control here. You do not raise your voice at my baby, she fired back. I do not care if he walked into your living room and rearranged everything. She took one step nearer and I could feel the heat off her. My body wanted to back away and my pride refused to shift. The child peeked around the guy and studied me carefully. You called me something, he murmured and rolled the new word on his tongue. His face was curious, not hurt, and that made me feel even worse. Shame and irritation twisted together, and I could not pick a side. Did you hear that? She pointed down like she had proof on the floor. He remembers exactly what you threw at him and how you looked. Her eyes shone with a mix of outrage and something like fear. That combination landed in my chest like a weight I did not want. You scared him and you humiliated us in our own yard. Her voice dropped lower, which somehow felt more dangerous than yelling. We moved here for a calm place and we get this circus. My pulse picked up because that sounded like the beginning of a bigger move. If you would just keep the gate shut, it would be fine. The sentence tumbled out before I could soften anything. I heard how rigid it sounded and hated myself mid-word. I watched her face shift from insulted to absolutely done with me. Listen to yourself, the guy cut in and leaned forward a little. You are obsessed with a gate and you are cursing at toddlers. He jabbed a finger halfway toward my chest, then dropped it back. For a moment I honestly wondered if he might actually swing. You think that was bad, he went on with a short laugh. Wait until your landlord hears you harass kids on the property. That was the first time the word landlord really punched through my anger. My lease flashed across my mind like a warning sign I had ignored. You are not getting me kicked out over one outburst, I blurted. The second it left my mouth, I realized how weak it sounded. Now it was me talking about consequences instead of his child. I could almost feel the power balance flip right in that instant. We will do whatever we need to keep him safe. She straightened her shoulders like she had just decided something final. That includes calling the police if you ever threaten him again. That word threaten hung in the air like its own accusation. I did not threaten him, I said, and heard the wobble anyway. I snapped, and I should not have used that word at him. The boy watched me closely as if he was grading the apology. I hated that my audience included a 3-year-old judge. That is not an apology, she answered without missing a beat. That is you justifying yourself so you do not feel guilty. Her nails pressed into her palm and left little half-moons. Mine were digging into the edge of the door in perfect sync. I am sorry for swearing at him, I tried again slower. I still need him to stay on your side, that is the line. That second half slipped out because I could not let it go. Her mouth tightened like I had spit on the one decent part. You are unstable, the guy muttered and shook his head once. You are angry about a latch and you are already backpedaling. His tone was almost bored now, which somehow cut more than shouting. That was the moment I felt myself turning into the villain in their story. The boy began drifting toward my doorway again with tiny steps. Instinct kicked in before reason, and I moved my foot across the gap. He bumped into my leg and blinked up at me startled. His mother gasped like I had shoved him, and my nerves blew apart. Do not block my son, she shouted and grabbed his arm quickly. You do not touch him and you do not stand over him like that. Her volume finally pulled a neighbor out from another unit. A door opened down the hall and someone just watched without a word. That silent audience made everything feel 10 times more official. Suddenly every motion felt like evidence and every phrase felt recorded. I saw a phone in the guy's hand and could not tell if it was on. Much later I would find out exactly how many people saw this part. For the record, she said and looked toward the other neighbor. I am asking you clearly to stop harassing my family. Her voice shook but the words came out measured and weirdly precise. It sounded like she had practiced that line in her head already. I opened my mouth and closed it because nothing useful showed up. Every sentence lining up in my brain either blamed them or begged. Both options tasted awful, so I just stood there breathing hard. In that pause I could feel their patience slam flat. "We are talking to the landlord tonight," the guy finally concluded. "We are also looking into a report for verbal abuse of a minor." He tossed the phrase out like he had Googled it 5 minutes earlier. Sometimes fake confidence still works when the other person is already rattled. They turned together and started back down the hallway with quick steps. The kid glanced over his shoulder once more like he wanted another forbidden word. I stayed in the entry and watched their backs move farther from me. Every footstep away sounded like a countdown I could not stop. The other neighbor shut their door quietly once the show ended. That tiny click felt worse than any comment they could have thrown. Now there was a witness who had seen only the ugliest slice. People fill in missing pieces with whatever story sounds easiest to repeat. I finally closed my own door and locked it out of reflex. My hands shook so much the latch rattled in its slot. Anger still burned there, but embarrassment had moved in beside it. Those two do not mix well when you are standing alone in a hallway. I grabbed my phone and typed a quick message to a friend. Neighbors furious because I cursed at their kid might call cops. I stared at what I had written and hated how small it looked. On the screen I was obviously the problem, and it made my chest ache. The reply came fast enough to make me jump at the buzz. "Yeah, that is bad," they wrote, "but letting kids sprint into your place is not okay either." That split answer matched the tug of war in my own head. Right then I knew this was not going to fade in a day. At the mailboxes my neighbor spun around and walked off fast. Her hand hovered over her key, then dropped as she spotted me. She mumbled something into her phone and headed for the stairs. I stayed there with my mailbox open and my name burning in my ears. By that evening the hallway felt different when I opened my door. Voices cut off halfway through sentences as I stepped outside. Two people I barely knew stared straight past me toward the parking lot. It was obvious they were not seeing the same version of me anymore. Out by the sidewalk I caught the parents talking to another couple. They were facing away from me, but their hands did all the work. "You do not scream at a toddler," the mom said loud enough for traffic. I kept walking anyway and pretended I did not know exactly who she meant. The other woman glanced at me over the stroller handle once. Her expression shifted from curious to careful in about 2 seconds. "That is awful," she answered while still looking right at my face. I felt like a character being discussed while the actor stood on set. I tried a test the next morning just to check my paranoia. I stepped out when the dog walker usually passed my door. We used to trade short jokes about broken elevators and loud plumbing. This time he nodded once and sped up like he had somewhere urgent. I stopped near the stairs and listened to my own pulse thumping. None of these people were there when the word left my mouth. Yet they moved around me like they had watched the replay 6 times. You know that feeling when everyone knows your worst moment except you? By midweek someone stuck a handwritten note on the lobby board. "Please be kind to children who live here," it read in stiff letters. No names appeared on it, but everyone knew it was aimed one way. I stood in front of it too long and felt my neck get hot. Behind me the kid's dad came through the door with a grocery bag. He caught sight of the paper, then looked straight at me without blinking. "You see the message?" he asked as he shifted the bag to one arm. "I see a lot of drama for one argument," I answered and hated my tone. He gave a quick humorless laugh and shook his head once. "You cursed at a preschooler in front of half the courtyard," he said. "You are lucky this is just talk right now and not a uniform." That last word hit harder than he probably realized, and he knew it. "Are you really telling everyone I am dangerous?" I asked quietly. If my voice had come out steady, maybe this went differently. Instead it wobbled and made me sound like I was asking for mercy. He watched that and his face actually softened for a second. "I am telling people to keep their kids away from your door," he answered. "After what you shouted, I would be a crappy parent if I did not." He shifted his grip on the bag and moved toward the stairs. I realized I had just been downgraded from neighbor to active risk. That afternoon my phone buzzed with an unknown number from the office. "Hi, I heard there was an issue with a resident and a child," the voice said. She did not use my name, but she did not need to. I sat down fast because my legs suddenly felt unreliable. "There was an argument," I answered and picked at a loose thread. I lost my temper and used language I should not use with a little kid. The admission tasted like metal, but it was technically true. I left out the part about the open doorway because I knew how that sounded. Children's safety is taken very seriously here, she replied in that careful tone. We have received multiple complaints about yelling and aggressive language. Multiple did not even sound real when I had only shouted once. That is when I understood how fast a story multiplies once it leaves your mouth. We will be documenting this conversation, she added after a short pause. I could picture a file with my name and the word child underlined twice. Please avoid direct contact with that family while we review everything. Somehow I had managed to become the one who needed managing. After the call, I opened my door just to breathe different air. The toddler was in the courtyard with a little plastic truck and pure focus. He looked up, saw me, and pointed like he had spotted a cartoon villain. That is the person who said the bad word, he announced to the sky. His mother snapped her eyes to me and then away like I was contagious. She scooped him up with one arm and turned her back hard. Her shoulders were tight enough that I half expected them to snap. I shut my own door again because I suddenly did not trust any move. Inside, I kept replaying the original moment and the hallway showdown. I was still convinced the boundary itself made sense in a basic way. The problem was that no one cared about my logic once the insult landed. They were reacting to the volume and the word, not the latch. I tried to vent to another neighbor I thought might be neutral. We ran into each other near the trash area and exchanged awkward smiles. People seem weird this week, I started, aiming for casual and missing badly. She lifted one shoulder and studied the pavement like it had secrets. I heard there was an issue with yelling at someone's little one, she said. Her voice stayed light, but her eyes never fully met mine. That kind of thing travels fast with parents, you know how it is. She walked off before I could even say it was my mouth they were discussing. Every small interaction built on the last like bricks I could not move. A neighbor brushed past me at the stairs and muttered, "Watch it," under breath. Another pulled their child to the other side of the hallway as I approached. I started changing my schedule just to dodge those tiny public verdicts. One evening I noticed something I should have clocked earlier and it chilled me. Their front door had a small lens pointed squarely toward the shared walkway. I remembered the argument in the yard and us standing right in its view. Back then I had not thought about who might be replaying that audio later. I stood there staring at that camera and felt my throat tighten. If they had footage of me snapping at their kid, they had power. Not just neighbor gossip power, but the type you can attach to emails. I knew exactly how ugly my voice sounded when pushed hard. That night I barely slept because my brain would not park anywhere. One part of me kept insisting they were overreacting and stirring drama. Another part kept whispering that if I heard an adult yell at my kid like that, I would go nuclear. It is a fun experience when you cannot even fully back your own side. Looking back now, this was the part I should have fixed something. I could have walked over with an actual apology and no conditions. I could have written a calm message to the office explaining the boundary clearly. Instead, I stayed stuck in that messy middle and waited for someone else to move first. Spoiler, they moved before I did. They did not just call or knock or request another talk. They found a louder way to show everyone exactly who I was in that 5-second clip. That is when things stopped being just hallway tension and turned into public trial. The clip hit my phone before dinner. Notification banner, neighborhood app, bold caption that punched me right away. Is this okay to say to a small child, with 3 dots? The thumbnail showed my front steps and the tiny figure near my gate. I opened it because of course I did. The video started mid-motion with the kid rushing forward. Then my own voice slammed out of the speaker without warning. Get away from my door, you little shit. Hearing it was worse than remembering it in my head. On screen I sounded older, harsher, like someone who enjoyed scaring kids. The boy jerked back and stared up like I had just kicked his toy. You could almost feel every person watching that reaction on their own couch. The recording was cropped tight on my walkway in their yard. No context, no hallway argument, no previous warnings about anything. Just a toddler near a gate and an adult barking a slur at him. If I had not known the story, I would have hated that adult too. Under the clip, the comments count jumped while I watched. First one at the top read, "Call the cops, this is abuse." Second one said, "If that was my kid, I would move right now." My heart sped up in time with every new angry bubble. Someone wrote, "Looks like our complex recognized the layout." Another tagged 3 residents I knew by their profile pictures. One of them responded with, "Oh good, I thought it was just us." That line told me they had already traded versions of me offline. I scrolled further and the tone kept climbing. "People like this should not live near families," one person wrote. "Landlord needs to be notified today," said another with stacked exclamation marks. My screen felt smaller with every swipe as if it wanted to drop me. There were maybe 2 voices trying for balance way down the list. "It is ugly to shout, but parents should watch their kids too," one comment said. "I hear both sides, boundaries matter and language matters," another tried. They got buried under replies accusing them of defending a bully. A private message popped up from a number I recognized. My coworker had sent a screenshot of the same post from his feed. "Dude, is this you?" was all he wrote next to the frozen frame. My jaw clenched so hard it actually hurt. I stared at the still image before answering anything. There I was at the edge of the porch, shoulders stiff, hand raised. Not raised like a friendly wave, more like I was about to grab something. The kid looked tiny next to the railing, and I looked furious. "It is me," I finally typed back, fingers hitting wrong letters. I lost it after he kept running through my doorway, long story. The reply came faster than I wanted. "Internet does not care about long stories, they care about that shout." I backed out of messages and returned to the thread again. A new comment from the kid's mom sat pinned under the video. "Our son stepped a few feet past his gate and this adult cursed at him," she wrote. "Please be careful, we are shaken and trying to protect our child." Reading her version scraped something inside my chest. She was not lying exactly, but she had trimmed everything to one angle. She left out the repeated gate slams, the rushing toward my lock, any part that helped me. In her script, I was just the grown-up who picked on a little boy. I kept imagining the moment she hit upload on that recording. Did she hesitate? Did she wonder if this might explode past the building? Or did she feel completely justified from start to finish? I honestly still do not know which option bothers me more. That night my work email chimed while the app was still open. Subject line, my name plus the word conduct. My hands went cold before I even clicked. Inside was a short message and the same frozen frame of me yelling. "Several staff were made aware of this video through community channels," the note said. "This behavior conflicts with our values around respect and safety," it continued. "Please meet with me tomorrow to discuss," ended the last line. No extra fluff, just a digital version of being called into the office. I barely slept before that meeting because my mind kept looping. Part of me raged about privacy, home life, all the usual defenses. Another part knew I worked in a field that talks about empathy constantly. The distance between that and my clip looked huge even to me. At the office, my manager already had the video queued on her laptop. She clicked play and folded her arms while we watched. That 5 seconds felt longer in a quiet conference room than in the courtyard. My own words sounded uglier through work speakers. When the clip ended, she let the silence hang for a beat. "Can you walk me through what is happening here?" she finally asked. I took a breath and tried to explain about the gate and the running in. Halfway through, I could hear myself sounding petty even as I talked. "The language toward the child is the focus here," she pointed out calmly. Regardless of any frustrations, that response crosses a line. She tapped a pen on the table while she waited for me to answer. I realized there was no version where I walked out of this untouched. "I agree the words were wrong," I managed after a long pause. I was scared he would get hurt and I reacted like a jerk. Calling myself that out loud almost knocked something loose in my throat. Admitting fear in front of my boss felt strangely more vulnerable than admitting anger. She nodded once, then asked about neighbors, complaints, possible reports. I told her what I knew, which was more than I wanted to admit. She listened, took a few notes, and finally closed the laptop. "This may blow over, but please understand, people link faces to employers. Walking back to my desk, I could feel eyes on my back. No one said anything, which somehow made it worse. Every casual glance felt like they had seen the video too. I opened my inbox just to have something to stare at. Later that evening back home, I replayed the clip alone. This time I watched everything except my own mouth. The kid's shoulders pulled in tight when I barked at him. His parents threw their arms out like they were catching shrapnel. I did not see any monstrous joy on my face, just raw frustration. But I saw something else that bothered me more. There was no hint in that frame thaw. I cared whether I frightened him. I looked like I cared only about my doorway and my rule. Scrolling down, I found a new branch of comments under the post. Someone had written, "Who has this guy's landlord info?" Another replied, "Message me, I can share." That was the moment I understood how fast offline consequences grow from online rage. I hovered over the reply box more than once. I drafted explanations, deleted them, wrote shorter versions, erased those too. Every sentence either sounded like an excuse or like a confession begging for mercy. I knew any word I left there would live under that clip forever. So I closed the app, then opened it again 5 minutes later. Anger would flare, then guilt, then this weird stubborn pride about my boundary. I kept asking myself, do I care more about being right or less hated? No answer felt clean, which made choosing one even harder. Looking back, that night shifted something in me. Until then, I had treated it like a stupid neighbor fight that got loud. Seeing my own voice framed as public evidence turned it into something else. It forced me to decide whether I wanted to keep defending or finally repair. I started with "to my neighbors" and hated it instantly. Crossed it out, "tried to your family," hated that more. Every version either sounded like a legal notice or a pity grab. My hand shook so much the pen left tiny stutters across the page. I forced myself to write the only true part first. "I am sorry for the language I used toward your son." No excuses, no extra sentences chasing that one down. Even writing it, my chest tightened because it made everything real. Next line, the one that always trips me up. "I still need him not to run into my home." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It looked so small under the apology and still felt crucial. I added one more line about wanting things calmer between us. Not friends, not even friendly, just less explosive. "I hope we can have peace as neighbors," I finally wrote. It sounded stiff, but it was the closest I could get. I folded the sheet once, then again, trying to slow my pulse. My brain kept offering better phrases 5 seconds too late. At some point, you have to stop editing and actually risk the outcome. I put the note in an envelope because bare paper felt too vulnerable. Walking down the hall with that envelope felt heavier than it should. Every door I passed looked like it might open and ask questions. Halfway there, I nearly turned back, ridiculous as that sounds. Cowardice is loud when you get close to fixing something. I reached their place and just stood there for a beat. No voices inside, no movement, nothing to give me a script. Knocking felt like starting another argument, sliding it felt sneaky. In the end, I tapped once, light enough to pretend it was nothing. Footsteps moved on the other side, then paused near the entrance. I laid the envelope carefully on the mat and stepped back. The peephole darkened for a second, then cleared again. I met that tiny circle of glass and knew they were right there. The door opened just enough for the mother to reach out. Her hand scooped up the envelope without crossing the frame. She kept her gaze fixed somewhere near my shoulder, not my face. "Got it," she murmured, then closed the gap between us with wood. I stayed standing there like an idiot for 2 more seconds. Part of me expected her to reopen the door with instant forgiveness. That is not how real life works, and I knew that. I turned away, feeling the whole hallway tilt under that quiet. Back inside, every shuffle from the hallway made me jump. I pictured them reading my words, arguing about them, shredding them. I will never know which version actually happened. Not knowing ended up being its own kind of punishment. The next morning, I caught them outside by accident. They were loading the kid into a car seat, moving quickly. The little guy spotted me first and lifted a hand to wave. His mother's arm shot out gently and lowered his arm back down. Our eyes finally met across the parking lot. She did not glare or yell or point at me. She just gave a tight nod that looked more like acknowledgement than acceptance. Then she buckled him in and shut the door with finality. That tiny nod haunted me more than the video comments. It was not approval and not open hatred either. It was the look you give someone you have filed away as unsafe. Somewhere between neighbor and threat, right in that ugly middle. After that day, they kept their distance like it was a new religion. If we ended up on the same sidewalk, they changed pace. Their son stayed on the far side, his hand wrapped in theirs. He still stared at my porch like it held a secret he was banned from. The building adjusted too, in its own quiet ways. Kids played closer to the other units, parents lingered near them. Conversations dipped when I walked by and picked up after I passed. No one said anything straight to my face, which almost felt worse. At work, the noise around the clip faded quicker than I expected. My manager checked in once, then moved on to bigger fires. People found new things to obsess over online, as they always do. The difference was that I still had to live next to the fallout. I started locking my gate every time I stepped inside. Not dramatically, just a soft click as a habit. Part of it was safety, part of it was fear of another explosion. I hated that a simple latch now carried that much history. Sometimes I would hear the kid testing the boundary from their yard. Little footsteps running up, a faint rattle on the other side. His parents' voices would pull him back with firm, sharp reminders. The word he had learned from me never came up out loud again. In quieter moments, I replayed two separate scenes in my head. One where I set the limit with basic calm and no insults. Another where I say nothing and let him wander in again. Both versions end without a viral clip, but only one protects anyone. Here is the part that still messes with me. I honestly believe adults need to hold lines around their space. I also believe kids should not be on the receiving end of that kind of rage. Those beliefs clash right at my front steps in my own voice. I wish I could tell you I walked over later and everything softened. I wish I had some neat lesson about communication and forgiveness. The truth is quieter and more awkward than that. We just moved into a new normal where we orbit each other carefully. So now I lock the gate, watch my tone, and keep my distance. They hold their child closer when I am around, but they do not use my face as a warning anymore. The video still exists somewhere online, frozen at my worst 5 seconds. I am the only one who has to replay the rest of the story. And I keep circling the same question when I think about it. That day, did I really stand up for a necessary boundary? Or did I just let fear and temper turn a toddler into my enemy for a moment? If you were living next door, which version would you believe?